it's hidden in amongst the dashboard and in amongst the dials.
Right.
And if you get a moment of that instinct taking over and you doubt yourself, the last thing you want to be doing is looking for something hidden in amongst the dials.
Yeah, you need it large and front and centre, right in the middle of the dashboard.
Head-up display.
Okay. So, nevertheless, you're not getting uptake. So what are you going to do now? Are you discouraged by the reaction?
I was discouraged, and I put all my paraphernalia away for another day if it ever came, and days come. And what's happening now is I'm getting emails, I'm getting people say, go for it. And I still have yet to have contact from a hire car company. But I'm sure that now that people are on my side, well, it's not my side, it's our side.
It's the left-hand side.
We're all having close encounters of the foreign kind. And I've had a couple of very close calls, which I thought to myself, this is ridiculous. This is something which is avoidable, and I'm going to push this again. So I'm now pushing it again.
It'll be interesting to see how you go with it. It's got the support of our panellists, Spike. Thank you, Spike Waderman. And the other idea that has come out of this from Deborah Coburn is existing technology, arrows that can be painted on the road and also reflect at night, to be utilised at points of travel where travellers change direction, like in that neck of the woods, the back road from Arrowtown. And this is also a good idea, isn't it?
And it's already there, but infrequently.
Yeah.
I went down to Hawke's Bay a couple of weeks ago, and I noticed on the Napier Taupo Road in the Waipunga Valley, there are arrows on the road pointing in the direction you should be going, but there are not nearly enough of them.
Yeah. Lawrence Yule, congratulated by the Taxpayers Union for standing down as mayor and not having a bob each way if he doesn't succeed in his parliamentary ambitions as the Tuki candidate. So he's getting applause from them. Applause from you as well. Is this a good idea for candidates to do this?
Well, I can see both sides of the argument. Why should you... If you've got a job, why should you get rid of it before you've actually captured another one? Now, Lawrence is a particular interest here because Lawrence actually won the mayoralty of Hastings District by telling people he intended to run for the full term, and he's clearly changed his mind. He's also going to have problems with the Havelock North water pollution, but in general terms, I think if you've decided to seek another publicly funded position, you should stand down from the one that you're currently in.
Ralph Manji standing against Jerry Brownlee, as we heard on the news at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, that's really weird. I can't understand that at all.
Stephen, what do you think about the practice?
We've got a funny one here. There's a Wellington councillor wants to go down and stand against Jerry Brownlee. What's Jerry got?
We don't have time to find out. Stephen Franks, thank you on the panel today with Mike Williams. Thank you, Mike, as well.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend, everybody, and we're all touching wood with the weather in the north. And Checkpoint with John Campbell coming right up.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Rowan Quinn, and on behalf of our excellent team, haere mai, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Tonight is Auckland facing its worst water crisis in 20 years. Mark Bourne from Watercare joins us live. Also tonight, the Upper North Island prepares for more rain and slips. We're in the Coromandel Valley, where locals say Tuesday night's deluge was the worst they've seen in 35 years. Christchurch City Councillor Ralph Manji announces he'll stand against Jerry Brownlee in Ilam. A health scare sparks a recall of lettuce across the country. And the Transport Agency says it plans to double the number of contractors working to repair State Highway 1 north of Kaikoura. That's coming up here after the news.
RNZ News at 5. No, my Heidi, my good afternoon. I'm Paul Brennan. Auckland's water provider is warning of the worst case scenario if people don't save enough in the wake of the floods. A boil water notice for the region. More than 220 millimetres of rain, or 2 months' worth, fell in 12 hours from late Tuesday in the Henua Ranges, washing a lot of dirt into one of the storage lakes for the city. Sally Murphy reports.
Watercare's Mark Bourne says people need to save about 20 litres of water each day. If that doesn't happen, partially treated water might have to go into the supply, requiring boiling water to make it safe to drink. Mr Bourne says silt and debris is clogging up the Ardmore treatment plant, the biggest in the country. It means the treatment plant is taking twice as long to process the water so it is drinkable. Mark Bourne says the water savings target is quite achievable, with half the target met in the first 24 hours. He's stressing the supply is completely safe for the moment. This is Sally Murphy.
Relentless rain is expected to continue through the night until tomorrow morning for the upper North Island. Heavy rain warnings remain in force for Northland, Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Auckland. A Met Service duty forecaster Lisa Murray says there could be up to 25 millimetres of rain within an hour in parts of Auckland.
And this is because of surface flooding and so much flooding in the region already. Through Coromandel, there is more rainfall expected there, and it's really right till about 10 a.m. on Saturday that the heaviest falls could fall there. But again, more rain expected through during Sunday as well.
Lisa Murray from Met Service. Repair work is still underway in the upper North Island to reconnect residents after extreme weather cut some phone and internet services. Kaikoura says it's taken 2 days to fix a major fault in Whangamata, one of a large number of faults reported across its network. A company spokesperson says repairs to another cable in the area are expected to be finished today. The Ministry for Primary Industries has swung into action over a salad contamination scare, and its website will soon have a full list of products recalled by the producer Leader brand. Listeria can be harmful to young children, pregnant women, elderly people and those with compromised immune systems. Anne-Marie May reports.
The company issued the recall and suspended operations at its factories after a batch tested positive for Listeria during regular testing yesterday. Leader Brand's chief executive Richard Burke says the Listeria finding is an isolated incident and the company takes health and safety very seriously. The fast food chain Subway, which uses Leader Brand products, says the recall might leave them out of lettuce for a day or two, but they prefer to be cautious. Both Foodstuffs and Progressive Enterprises have removed Leader Brand products from supermarket shelves. Customers who have bought the products since March the 3rd are being advised to dispose of them or return them for a full refund. This is Anne-Marie May.
South Korea's highest court has upheld a decision by Parliament to remove the president, Park Geun-hye, from office over a corruption scandal that has gripped the country for months. She becomes South Korea's first democratically elected leader to be forced from office and could now face criminal charges. The ABC's Rachel Mealy reports.
In a unanimous verdict of South Korea's Constitutional Court, the 8 judges voted in favour of removing President Park from the office she's occupied since 2012. The decision comes after months of turmoil for the country. The Parliament voted to impeach the president back in December after allegations emerged that she and her friend had been involved in bribery and corruption. Today's verdict means presidential elections will be held to choose her successor in the next 60 days.
Rachel Mealy reporting there. The Transport Agency says about 300 people will be working on the ground to repair the quake-damaged State Highway 1 north of Kaikoura, but only when it is safe to get more contractors in. The route south of the town opened just before Christmas, but the northbound part of the highway isn't expected to open until the end of this year. The agency's earthquake recovery manager, Steve Martin, says at the moment about 120 people are working on the 9 major slips north of Kaikoura. He says more will be called in once helicopters finish sluicing work.
We need to make sure that all the loose rock has been dislodged from the higher cliffs. So the helicopters are coming in, putting water on them, which brings all the loose material down. Once that's done, it's then safe to bring the machinery in.
The Transport Agency's Steve Mutton. It's 4.5 minutes past 5. To sport now, and the Black Caps have finished their first innings on 341 on day 3 of the first test against South Africa in Dunedin. A late flurry of boundaries from Neil Wagner has given New Zealand a lead of 33 runs. Ross Taylor returned to the crease as New Zealand's last batter after retiring hurt earlier in the innings. He could only manage a 6 as he struggled to stand on his injured calf. A short time ago, the Proteas were 7 for 1 at the start of their second innings. The Hurricanes and Chiefs are both hoping to employ an expansive brand of Super Rugby in tonight's top-of-the-table clash in Hamilton. Though the Waikato weather may halt those plans, the two teams are unbeaten after 2 rounds, with the Chiefs arguably better prepared, having played 2 New Zealand sides. Hurricanes coach Chris Boyd says the forecast wet weather could turn the game into a slugfest.
Looks like it's going to be wet. I think that will dictate how much football both sides are prepared to play. We'd like to continue with some good defensive pressure and continue with our attacking game, but it might not be possible to do either.
Chris Boyd there. The Hurricanes have recent history on their side. They've won 3 of their last 4 games against the Chiefs, including last year's semi-final. And Australian Brad Kennedy leads the New Zealand Golf Open by 1 shot after the second round in Arrowtown. Kennedy's 16 under after 2 rounds, following a sensational 9 under 62 this morning. He's a shot clear of New Zealand's Ben Campbell. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the joy of quilting with Liz Nichols. They've got it covered at the celebration of the craft in Fielding this weekend. Country Life meets the farmer who reckons he can have his cattle and keep his creeks clean. There's a mixtape from the Kiwi composer and singer Layla Adu, and we have a sonic tonic dedicated to the sounds and songs of things subterranean. Going underground on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. Here's the short forecast now, taking us through to midnight tomorrow, Saturday. Remember, heavy rain warnings in force for the northern North Island and upper South Island. So Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, periods of rain or showers, thunderstorms and localised downpours at times, especially in the afternoons and evenings. Waikato through to Manawatu, that includes Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. A few showers turning to periods of rain this evening or tonight. Localised downpours and thunderstorms are possible, mainly overnight and again tomorrow afternoon. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, occasional rain or showers, some heavy falls tomorrow, isolated thunderstorms from tomorrow afternoon. Hortowhenua to Wellington, also Wairadapa, mainly fine today, occasional rain or showers tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland, periods of rain developing this evening, some heavy falls in Nelson in the morning tomorrow. Canterbury, fine today, rain develops overnight, a few heavy falls are possible tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, cloud increasing. Scattered rain developing about Otago tomorrow, and at the Chathams, fine today, rain developing tomorrow. It's nearly 8 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Paul. Auckland is facing its biggest water crisis in more than 20 years. Watercare's warning that residents may have to boil their water if they don't save enough now. That's because the dams in the Hunua Ranges got 2 months' worth of rain in just 2 hours this week, and the silt and debris is clogging up the Ardmore treatment plant, the biggest in the country. Well, the Watercare spokesman Mark Bourne's on the line now. Hi, Mark.
Good afternoon.
Now, so is the problem that so little water is getting through to the plant that you might actually have to let untreated water into the mix that goes out to residents in the city?
Yeah, it's not so much that there's so little water coming into the plant, it's really the fact that that water coming into the plant is literally so dirty. So what that's meant is rather than the normal speed at which we can pass the water through our treatment processes, we've had to slow that down. So that means over the course of a day, we're only treating about half as much water as we would normally be able to treat at that facility.
And then, would you purposely let untreated water through if there wasn't enough treated water?
Yeah, so what we've done in the first instance is maximise output at all of our other treatment facilities, and that's offset a significant portion of the shortfall by only having this plant operating at half its capacity. And if all of our Auckland customers are able to reduce their demand by a small amount, a modest amount, 20 litres per person per day, then that'll be more than enough water and we'll be fine. But it is a very, very serious situation, and the consequences, if we don't meet those savings targets, will require that we need to have that partially treated water would be put into supply.
And how are Aucklanders doing so far?
We're doing really well. I mean, this campaign is only 24 hours old. It was only yesterday afternoon we called for action. And at this time of the year, we would expect to use about 450 million litres of water per day across the region. Yesterday, we used 420, so we made significant savings, 30 million litres of water saved. But what we've got to get down to is a target of 400 million litres a day. Now, to put that into perspective, that's about the same amount of water as we use in the wintertime. So we're not asking people to do anything more than they would normally do in the wintertime. So obviously, what's the big difference between summer and winter? Well, one of the big things is outdoor use. Now, right now, I don't think anyone's watering their garden, and so we're not asking for those sort of savings to be made at the moment, but what we're targeting is simple things people can do inside the home.
So, Mark, what is the absolute worst case scenario here for the plant and for Auckland's water supply?
Well, I think we're a little way away from the worst case, but what we do need to realise is that we're asking people to save water, but the consequences is if we don't meet those savings targets, we still need to maintain supply into the pipeline so that we can flush toilets and do all the other things we do with water. The reality is the amount of water we actually consume for drinking purposes and cooking purposes is a relatively small proportion of the total amount. So that worst case scenario would be that partially treated water would still be chlorinated with capacity to supply, but it would require additional treatment. And the best thing for that is boiling the water that you're going to consume directly.
And what kind of bugs are we talking about that could be making their way into people's water?
Yeah. So I think, once again, we just need to put things into a little bit of perspective. We're very, very fortunate in Auckland that the vast majority of our water, the water from the Hanua Ranges and the water from the Waitakere Ranges, comes from protected catchments. What that means is there's no industrial activity, there's no farms, there's no activity in those catchments at all. Water falls on native bush catchments or pine forest catchments and is stored in those dams. So the water quality itself, even that raw water quality, is very, very high quality compared with other sources of water. The treatment plant still offers those barriers of treatment, and the final portion of that is disinfection through chlorination. So it's quite unlike other parts of the world. But the important thing, I think, is right now the water quality that's in our taps is certainly safe to drink. There's no compromise in it at all, and that's why we've reduced the output from our Ardmore treatment plant. But what we're looking for is just everyone making those savings.
Well, thank you very much for your time. That was the Watercare spokesman, Mark Bourne. Well, rain warnings are in place for much of the Upper North Island tonight, with residents north of Taupō being warned to watch out for dangerously high river levels and more road slips. In a few minutes, we'll hear from the Met Service's Georgina Griffiths. But first, let's go to our reporter, Zach Fleming, who spent the day in the Coromandel and joins us from Tairua.
Good evening, Rowan. Yeah, we headed north today to Coro Glen, just south of Whirianga, where we found groups of frustrated locals who still don't have power 48 hours after these floods first hit on Tuesday night. They say they also haven't heard from any authorities, nothing from Civil Defence, despite the roads they use to get to their houses covered in slips in some places, or even in instances fallen away. They're also convinced that not only was there a flood on Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning, there was also a surging tidal wave down the river they live next to. We travelled down Rangihau Road in Coro Glen today, and one of those locals we spoke to is Ian Eagleton. On Tuesday, this was a luxury eco-camping site set in remote bush on the edge of the Rangihau River in the Coro Glen Valley. Overnight, owner Ian Eagleton's dream washed away as the rain continued to fall.
This is what's left of what we call the Panga Pool, the beautifully cleared picnic site. Kauri, Totara, Kahikatea, and a central feature was the Panga. You're looking onto an emerald green, beautiful Coromandel bush pool of fresh spring water. It was kind of paradise on earth for the use of privately of their eco-campers. Compare that. Look at the size of this. It's bigger than a car. This is what came through here. And there's trees up here that have been snapped off 20 metres up and then smashed again. This is just, the force of this is, that's why I liken it to a tsunami.
Yeah, this tree trunk must weigh a couple tonne at least.
At least.
Can we get through here?
Yeah, you can. The best way through here, follow me. So at 4 a.m, we heard what sounded like an explosion. What that explosion was a wall of water that around the corner up the gorge, it's 100 metres high, 200 metres where it's scythed around bends in the river. It's come around the bend and skythed through the bush and major trees and a direct line to the campsite.
A young couple Ian remembers only as Molly and Oscar were staying at the campsite. He says they woke to find water coming up through the floorboards.
I looked out the window and he's flashing his SOS high-powered light towards our farmhouse because we can see it. I saw it and go, something is bad here. At that stage the water was starting to come into our house. I knew what was happening down here was going to be very bad. The light went out. All I could think about is whatever's happening here, I hope it's not too bad here. I was totally wrong. It was 10 times worse. So I got in the four-wheel drive and tried to drive down. I couldn't get very far. What I wanted to do was to show them that I had seen their signal. So I crossed a fence line and went through water nearly up to my neck that was coming across the paddock to our house before I even got to here. I shone a torch. By that stage, Oscar and Molly had entered the water and had left the campsite. I couldn't see anything. It's 4 a.m. It's pitch black out here. I thought they were gone, but I got to probably around about 80 metres from them and shone and flashed a torch. At that stage, I heard her screaming, "Help me." And I knew they were alive. So they must have got up a tree. They had to onto the platform. I had no idea of what they had done. So just happy to know that they were alive. I couldn't get any closer. I just had to say, "You have to hold on." Screaming, "Hold on. I'm not leaving you." And they did. I went back to the house. What they'd done, Oscar and Molly had exited the tent. You must realise it's pitch black and all they had was quite a high-powered torch and a high-powered lantern. They thought about getting in the car and driving out. So lucky they didn't. The series of events happened so fast for them. I can understand because you look at how the wave of water came towards them.
Their car was parked up here?
Their car was just parked over here. As this event was happening, their car disappeared. At that stage, Holly grabs the big chili bin we have out here, opens it up and starts putting her mobile phone in, his mobile phone, credit cards, possessions, whatever they had, and close it up and get ready to leave the site. Young Oscar, he's from Perth in Australia, he takes his jersey off and all he can see is blackness and water and throws his jersey into the water to calculate the drift line. This is what they tell me afterwards. He sees the jersey drift in a direct line away from the campsite. What he doesn't realise is that there's a torrent to the right of him with trees crashing through, and to the left of him, the car disappearing and the river. Then they enter the water, clinging onto the chili bin, and by knowing that there's a line of trees opposite them, they don't know that half those trees are gone. They make it across there, and he manages to hook around the tree, probably the only tree he could have, because there's a gap next to them where there's nothing. As she lets go the chili bin and he drags into the tree, the water takes them up. At this stage the water was probably, I look at that tree and it was probably 5-6 metres high. So they're up the tree and they're still in water, so they get higher and they get to the point where they are interlocked around the branches. It's just a kanuka tree. While around them there's just, they can only hear it. There's cracking and snapping and I just can't. And then eventually I come back at first light, which is the only chance I really get to make sure that I'm safe and to calculate where they might be, and then I see them and they're okay. I get to them and they're amazingly calm, way up the tree. I can't even have time to comprehend the debris and damage. The platform I thought they got to, which was a purpose-built with 3-foot wide rounds sunk into the ground, that's gone. That's smashed to bits. Thank God they didn't get there. The one tree they got up was the right tree. And they must have been in the water and up that tree at that stage for 2 hours plus until I got to them. So they knew how to survive. And they were smart.
Standing near the river on Ian's property, there's around 2 football fields of native bush that's been completely flattened when the surge of water rushed down the river. Trees that are around 3 or 4 stories high were cut down as if they were nothing.
This was a very quick, enormous event. that went away very quickly but left so much damage.
Ian says there's been no sign of civil defence, and while the camping site is now closed, he has fears for what may happen if more heavy rain hits tonight.
The question that has to remain is, what if those dams build up again? This is a 100-plus year event. Who's going to do something about ensuring this scale that could have killed so many people doesn't happen again?
Meanwhile, Molly and Oscar's car ended up a kilometre away, written off beneath the rubble. The couple is now headed for drier ground in Tauranga. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
So no respite ahead for those recovering from record rainfall in the past few days. Heavy thundery downpours between now and Sunday for northern parts of the North Island are likely to bring further slips and dangerously high river levels to the already saturated northeast. Speaking to our producer Bridget Burke, the Met Service meteorologist Georgina Griffiths gives us a glimpse of what's expected this weekend.
Between now and Sunday night, we expect quite a lot of different and rough localised weather for the upper North Island. We have heavy rain warnings in force for Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, as well for later on for Northwest Nelson. In these regions, we're going to see periods of rain with some dry slots in between. Whenever it rains, because it's so very humid, we might get very heavy rainfall locally, some localised downpours. And because the northeast of the North Island, these regions, have been so wet recently, if we get 35 millimetres an hour or 40 millimetres an hour, then those areas will be impacted because the regions are already saturated. And then we see an easing tomorrow morning, Saturday morning, to showers, some of which may be heavy, Saturday afternoon and evening locally, very spotty, but still continued risk of heavy localised falls. And again on Sunday, potential for these warning areas to see another burst of heavy rain. So it's several events of heavy rain, and the main concern for us is the localised downpours. Not everyone will see these, but if you do, you would expect some impacts because the regions are so saturated.
Are we likely to see rain to the same extent we have in the past couple of days?
Yes, so the Tuesday event clocked up some, rainfall numbers between 1 and 200 millimetres, depending on where you were at the worst spots. Looking ahead over the next 2 days, the rainfall forecasts are of similar magnitude, spread out over a slightly longer period of time. I don't think that matters, though, this time, because, as mentioned, we've had a burst of heavy rain in these North Island areas, Northland, Auckland, Coromandel, and the Western Bay of Plenty. We're about to get another burst, and it's that risk of localised thunderstorm that's the problem. If we get downpours and 30 millimetres an hour or 25 millimetres an hour, it's causing issues now because rivers rise rapidly once they're saturated, and you get that downpour on top of it. Slips occur from now on and surface flooding occurs. So not everyone will have a localised downpour, but if you do, and you live in Northland, Auckland, Coromandel or the Bay of Plenty, there may well be impacts. There's also watches in place for the Waikato, the high country of the North Island, and Gisborne north of Tolaga Bay. So if you live north of about Taupo, then you're going to have to keep up with the watches and warnings across the whole weekend because there's a lot going on. We change from rain tomorrow morning to more showery in nature. Not everyone, some people see blue sky tomorrow, which will make a really nice change. But these showers, when they occur tomorrow, these heat showers that bubble up in the northern areas of the North Island are likely to be locally heavy again. And as mentioned, that burst of heavy rain on Sunday to follow. So it's going to be a long weekend and a very busy one.
And that's meteorologist Georgina Griffiths speaking to our producer Bridget Burke. Coming up, Christchurch City Councillor Raf Manji says Jerry Brownlee's hampered Christchurch's recovery and he'll be standing for Parliament against him in Ilam. And a listeria scare sparks a recall of lettuce from major supermarkets across the country. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. And don't forget, you can watch us online on Facebook Live at rnz.co.nz/checkpoint or on Freeview Channel 50. Well, Christchurch has outgrown Jerry Brownlee and deserves better representation, according to the man who plans to topple the earthquake minister in this year's election. Christchurch City Councillor Ralph Manji will stand as an independent in Ilam electorate, which is the one that Jerry Brownlee has been the local MP for 20 years. Mr Manji told John Campbell this afternoon that Christchurch's recovery has been hampered by Mr Brownlee and he no longer has what Christchurch needs.
Christchurch needs an independent voice and an ability to tell its own story, which is separate to the political party process that we normally go through in an election. You know, we're only 5 years through what is a 10 to 15 year recovery program, and the political party process, you know, can be helpful, but actually it's Christchurch that is the story, and that's the story that I want to tell, and I think we need an independent voice in Parliament that is just telling the Christchurch story.
That's a good answer, but if you really wanted to get into Parliament, there are electorates you would have more chance of winning, right? So it is a pointed thing to stand against Jerry Brownlee and Ilam, isn't it? And what point are you making?
Well, I'm not sure I agree with that. I mean, it's my home patch. I've won 2 elections there in the last 3.5 years. Both for council, standing in different wards within the community board that serves Ilam. So that's just a coincidence, really. But I think actually, for me, this is not just about Parliament. It is actually about saying Christchurch needs this representation. You know, we still see ourselves being a little bit ignored on the national stage, and we still have some major problems here. The job is only half done, and I think we need some advocates who are just telling our story.
Raf, you're standing against the Earthquake Recovery Minister. You're standing against Christchurch's Cabinet Minister, most senior Cabinet Minister. Now, this is the strange thing about Christchurch. There are a whole lot of people behind the scenes who say to me quite often, we're not happy with Jerry Brownlee and the job he is doing for us, in some part. And yet when it comes to saying it on the record, people equivocate and resile and back away. Why aren't you explicitly saying, I am pointedly standing against Jerry Brownlee?
Well, I am standing against Jerry Brownlee, and I do think that we need to see change. So, yeah, I'm quite happy to say that. It's not personal. I mean, Jerry's done, a huge workload. He's had to carry a lot for the last 6 years, and to be honest, you know, he probably should have stood down from that portfolio, probably when the SARE Act expired in 2016, and let somebody else come on and drive it forward with new energy. And I think ultimately we need new leadership for Christchurch. We need leadership that is collaborative, we need leadership that is inclusive, and we need leadership that is strategic, and that's what needs to change.
Can I interrupt? So you use the words collaborative, inclusive and strategic. Yeah. Are you saying that Jerry Brownlee is not those things?
No, I wouldn't say that's been his leadership style. And I think, you know, it's fair to say that the first couple of years, I think his style was quite useful. A lot of hard decisions had to be made for the city. But I think really from the blueprint onwards, we've struggled. We haven't had a strategic view. This was confirmed in the Auditor General's report that was released a couple of months ago. And, you know, we need to be asking the questions. We need to review what we've done. And where are we going? Where's the economic development plan? Where's the thinking for the next 10 years? Where's the population plan? You know, we need to refresh this, and I think now's the time to do it.
It's easier to do it when you have friends in Parliament, isn't it? I mean, let's work on the assumption that if you win, you will be a lone voice. Wouldn't it be easier to belong to a caucus, and even better than that, belong to a government? In other words, why didn't you attach your candidacy to a party that has a prospect of being government, either National or Labour?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Again, I go back to the independent piece. I mean, look, we have independents in Parliament. We have David Seymour. We have Peter Dunn. They're both part of the government. We have the Māori Party, which is part of the government. And you could argue this is going to be a very close election, and actually the more independents in Parliament, the better, I think.
I guess the other point is that you get 2 votes, right? And the people of Ireland, if they want to vote National or Labour or Green or whatever, can do so. What you're saying, I'm hearing, is that you just want to independently represent both the Ilam electorate and the best interests of Christchurch, full stop.
yeah, this is the best for Christchurch approach. And in some respects, this harks back to the Northland election, where, you know, Winston got in and really understood that the people there wanted some place-based representation. And I think we have got so used to political parties and the machinery of politics that it has in some ways taken us away from those stories. And I think you can see the regions are starting to get a bit restless and feel that they're not being properly represented. And with MMP, we can do that. We have the list system, so there's no reason, you know, that Jerry can go on the list. I can be the elected MP, and then actually we get 2 MPs for the price of 1. But I think, you know, the representation for Christchurch is really important.
And that was Ralph Manji talking there to John Campbell. Well, Jerry Brownlee won Ireland by capturing 58% of the vote in the last general election, more than double his nearest rival, Labour's James Macbeth Dan, who got 24%. And we invited Mr Brownlee on the programme tonight, but we are yet to hear back. The Transport Agency is planning to more than double the number of people working to repair the quake-damaged State Highway 1 north of Kaikoura when it's safe to get more contractors on the ground. The route south of the town opened just before Christmas, but work on the northbound part of the highway between Kaikoura and Clarence isn't expected to be completed until the end of this year. Our visual journalist Rebecca Parsons-King and reporter Maya Burry checked in on progress repairing the road north.
The Transport Agency says 120 people are working on the 9 major slips north of Kaikoura, created by the massive earthquake in November. Its earthquake recovery manager, Steve Mutton, says it is still aiming to have the route open before Christmas.
The work's progressing really well. So there's 9 massive slips north of Kaikoura here, and we're currently around 7 of the toes of those slips, which means we've created construction tracks around the bottom of those slips. So we can all get to Allhale Point, which is the largest slip, which is going to take the longest to clear.
There has been criticism from some locals in Kaikoura who rely on the highway to bring tourists and income to the town. Steve Mutton says he understands locals' frustrations, but says crews are working tirelessly. He says at the moment helicopters are still being used to loosen debris and bring down large rocks, and the number of people on site will more than double when more work can be done on the ground.
We need to make sure that all the loose rock has been dislodged from the higher cliffs. So the helicopters are coming in, putting water on them, which brings all the loose material down. Then we put in abseilers that go in and they pick away the remaining loose rocks. Once that's done, it's then safe to bring the machinery in that can start creating tracks up into the slips and start bringing the material down.
Work to repair the badly damaged railway line, which is an important freight route between Christchurch and Picton, is also underway. Kiwi Rail's project director for the recovery work, Walter Rushbrook, says the damage stretches from Blenheim to Spotswood.
The fact that we can't run trains to the South Island, it's a big disruption to both domestic and export traffic. So the alternatives are not that good. So we're focusing hard on getting the railway back up and running as soon as possible.
The small seaside town of Rakotara, which is home to about 11 people, is stuck between 2 slips on the road north. An access route has only recently been cleared for residents there. Before then, they were having to walk through train tunnels and over huge boulders to get to Kaikoura. Rakotara resident Naio Te Ua says given the damage is huge and widespread, it's not surprising how long things are taking.
We used to go through the tunnels with our wheelbarrows to bring our supplies back, and that's only changed within the last 2 weeks or 10 days since they've put in the road that we now can drive on to get to town. And so I guess that's been the biggest change so far.
Ms Te Ua hopes the Transport Agency's Christmas deadline isn't too optimistic.
You know, even the road that they did from Christchurch to Kaikoura, that has to be closed every night at 8 o'clock and open at 6 in the morning. And that's meant to be a good road. So yeah, another 9 months ago, probably not.
You're not holding out hope?
Well, no, not holding my breath, no.
But Ms Te Ua says for now, the peace and quiet of living in isolation between 2 slips suits her just fine. In Kaikoura for Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
Coming up, a former Hamilton rest home worker convicted for assaulting an elderly dementia patient wants to become a trained nurse. And Wanaka retailers celebrate the news they can finally open for business on Easter Sunday. But first, here's Paul Brennan with the headlines.
Thank you, Rowan. In our headlines, there's been an unexpected halt in play late on day 3 of the cricket test between the Black Caps and South Africa in Dunedin. A fire alarm in the grandstand at University Oval has gone off, forcing the evacuation of everyone at the ground. A fire engine has arrived on the scene, and South Africa were 14 for 1, 19 runs behind New Zealand when play was suspended. Auckland's water provider is warning people may have to boil their water if they don't cut consumption following this week's floods. Heavy rain in the Hunua Ranges has washed a lot of dirt into one of the storage lakes for the city. Watercare says unless Aucklanders cut their daily water consumption from 450 million litres to 400 million litres, partially treated water will have to be released from Ardmore, resulting in a boil water notice. Meanwhile, heavy rain warnings remain in force overnight tonight for much of the upper North Island. The Ministry for Primary Industries website will soon have a full list of salad products recalled by the producer Leader brand over a contamination scare. The company has suspended operations at its factories after a batch tested positive for listeria during regular testing yesterday. Customers who have bought the products since March 3rd are being advised to dispose of them or return them for a refund. South Korea's highest court has upheld a decision by Parliament to remove the country's President Park Geun-hye from office. The Constitutional Court said Ms Park had violated the law by allowing her friend Choi Soon-sil to meddle in state affairs. The Christchurch City Councillor, Raf Manji, is to stand as an independent against the Senior Minister Jerry Brownlee in his seat of Ilam at this year's election. Mr Manji says Christchurch's recovery has been hampered by Mr Brownlee, who has led the government's response to the Canterbury earthquakes. And the principal of Wellington College says the boys at the centre of a controversy over comments about rape will face consequences. They boasted on Facebook about raping drunk, unconscious girls. In a letter to parents, Roger Moses says a process is underway, so he can't yet say what will happen to them. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 6.
And turning to business now with Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona.
How are you?
Good. Retail card spending eased back in February from a strong result last month. So what are we all spending less on?
Well, we're spending less on everything. It seems like, I guess, after the Christmas holiday season, we've put our credit cards back into our wallets for a while. I know I did. I don't know about you. But yes, definitely spending definitely eased, but not to be concerned. Economists have looked at those numbers and thought, well, coming off a very strong January, it's still quite high and underpinned by migration, strong labour, and I guess interest rates are still relatively low. So you could expect spending to pick up again, no doubt.
And the Commerce Commission has extended that time frame for their decision on whether they're going to let Fairfax and NZME merge. Any idea what's behind that extension?
You know, it was just a very short email that we got from the Commerce Commission early this morning, and it basically said that they agreed with Fairfax and NZME to extend the deadline. Now, what exactly that means, we don't know because the Commission isn't elaborating and the parties of the merger aren't either. And so the time frame was extended to April 11th. That's almost a whole month. We were expecting a decision on or before the 15th of this month. Anyway, we're going to wait a little longer on that. I guess it means that the Commission hasn't made up their mind. And I suppose if you're NZME and Fairfax, that might be a good thing. However, there may be some other buyers in the wings there if things don't work out for their merger. And yeah, so that's pretty much what we know about the NZME merger. I have a lot to say about that.
And as always, you can tell us what's happening in the markets today.
I can tell you that the New Zealand dollar has a slightly more positive tone today after overnight dipping below that 69 US cents. Well, it hasn't been that low for a long time, but it came back up again this afternoon, a little stronger tone, 69.1 US cents, which is just where we were yesterday pretty much. 91.9 Australian again, where we were. 56.8 pence, and the top 50 index, well, funny, yesterday we had gone down 0.5%, today we're up 0.5%. Yesterday we went down 37 points, today we're up 37 points, so we really haven't gained anywhere. We're at 7,178, and that was the week in business.
Thank you very much, Nona. Well, a former Hamilton rest home worker convicted for assaulting an elderly dementia patient wants to become a trained nurse. News that's come as an unpleasant surprise for the victim's family. Sonali Deo was secretly videoed slapping 86-year-old Piri Hemi on the hip and face as she tried to roll him over in bed in June last year. Our Waikato reporter Andrew McRae was in the Hamilton District Court for the 23-year-old sentencing.
Sonali Deo was working on her own when the assault took place at Hamilton's Cascades retirement facility. Judge Kim Saunders told her that there was no justification for the way she treated Pirihemi, who she said was vulnerable and totally reliant on Deo. The judge said that while Deo was inexperienced and completely out of her depth, assistance with Mr Hemi was available. She described the assault as moderately serious but unacceptable behaviour and a huge breach of trust. Mr Hemi's son Alan says while the other staff at the home treated his father like a king, Deo didn't, as shown by the video.
Like she said, slapping him on the face and hips, and then she's also grabbing him and jerking him around like a sack of spuds.
The secret filming was done after Mr Hemi's family saw a dramatic change in his manner.
He did have Alzheimer's, he did have dementia. I mean, he couldn't talk properly, he could talk here properly, but he laughed and sang songs with us, and as soon as he went into there, he didn't sing no more. He didn't laugh. And then he started telling us stuff, don't hit me, I'm dumb.
Deo asked for a discharge without conviction, saying it would probably stop her being accepted for nursing training and registration. Judge Saunders dismissed this, saying it wasn't necessarily a bar to registration, and the Nursing Council was entitled to make its own decision, knowing all the facts. Alan Hemi was very surprised to hear that Deo wanted to be a nurse.
I think it's the audacity of it, really,
The court heard that Deo had written a letter of apology, but that was news to the family. Piri's daughter-in-law, Priscilla Hemi.
Her so-called remorse signature of note is unheard of, let alone that's the first we heard of it being submitted to the courts. So I'm surprised to even hear that she even made one.
Yeah, the audacity of saying that we haven't received one. We've never been said sorry to.
Alan Hemi says an apology early on would have certainly helped.
She's not my best friend at the moment, and it would have made a difference to me if she'd have come up serious, for real, and said, I'm sorry about what I've done to your family. I'm only young. Absolutely. Like she said, I need a chance. We might have felt that a bit in here, but I'm glad she was convicted.
Alan Hemi says he hopes what happened to his father can in some way help other elderly people in rest homes.
For someone in a rest home to take more care and more pride in their job and treat the elderly and the young with a bit more,
utmost respect.
A bit more respect, and just do it if it's like your mum and your dad and your little sister and your brother, just do unto others as you like them to do to you, or your mum and dad.
Piri Hemi died peacefully in Waikato Hospital in January this year. His son says today's conviction means justice has been served for his dad, even if Piri isn't alive to see it. In Hamilton for Checkpoint, Ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
Concerns have been raised that one of the boys at the centre of a Facebook controversy at Wellington College will represent his school at a major sporting event tomorrow. Two boys joked on Facebook about raping drunk, unconscious girls. In a letter to parents today, Wellington College Principal Roger Moses says a process is underway and he can't say what consequences the boys will face. He also praised the boys who reported the comments to the school. But Checkpoint understands one of the boys who posted the lewd comments will represent the college at the North Island Secondary School Rowing Championships at Lake Karapiro this weekend. Checkpoint has contacted Mr Moses, the Board of Trustees and their public relations representative, but all are yet to return our calls. South Korea's president has become the country's first democratically elected leader to be forced from office. The Constitutional Court has upheld Park Geun-hye's impeachment over a graft scandal involving big business which has gripped the country for months. She could now face criminal charges. Paula Hancock is CNN's correspondent in Seoul and has this report on the president's rise to power and her downfall.
She grew up in the presidential Blue House, but more than half a century later, Park Geun-hye leaves it in disgrace.
Her father, Park Chun-hee, seized power in a military coup in 1961, an economic hero to some, a brutal dictator to others. In 1974, Park's mother was killed in an assassination attempt meant for her father. Just 5 years later, her father was also killed, shot by his own security chief.
The Park Geun-hye story actually began more or less promising, but eventually ended up as her becoming a tragic figure.
Park herself was attacked during an election rally in 2006, but she returned to the Blue House in 2013 as the country's first female president. No husband, no children. She said she was married to the nation. April 2014, tragedy struck. A passenger ferry sank off the coast of South Korea. Hundreds drowned, most of them school children. A man-made accident blamed on corruption and incompetence.
And that was a stain on her presidency. There was a palpable sense at that time that she wasn't there. It's not that people expected her to magically save the ship, but there was a need for leadership.
Speaking to CNN a few months earlier, she laid out her priorities.
I believe that one should value and place the utmost value on trust and confidence.
But she lost both in the eyes of most last year. A massive corruption scandal centred around this woman, Chae Shill, the daughter of a cult-like religious figure who had the trust and the ear of the president. Chae is on trial for meddling in state affairs and extorting money. She denies the charges against her. The public reaction was swift. Hundreds of thousands taking to the streets every single Saturday during the brutal Korean winter. Massive and peaceful calls for her impeachment. Lawmakers agreed, voting to impeach Park in December. Prosecutors want Park to be investigated as a bribery suspect when she loses presidential immunity. Park denies wrongdoing. Pro-Park groups protested to keep the president in power, but to no avail. Corruption is nothing new in South Korea. Every single president since democracy came to this country in 1988 has had some kind of connection to corruption, either directly or through a family member. But this time, much of the public had had enough.
The South Korean public's emotional outrage and anger is a reflection of feeling betrayed, feeling like their hard-built democracy has immediately gone down the drain.
The president's daughter, who became president, leaves office tainted by scandal.
That's Paula Hancock's reporting there, and South Korea will now hold an election in the next 60 days to choose a new president. Well, legal challenges against the US President Donald Trump's revised travel ban are mounting. Hawaii has announced a lawsuit while Washington State is resurrecting the challenge it made to the first order. Others are joining in. The watered-down ban still prevents citizens from 6 mainly Muslim countries from entering the US, and it's due to come into effect on March the 16th. The ABC's Anne Barker has this report.
Outwardly, the White House shows no signs of worry as more states join a lawsuit against Donald Trump's revised immigration ban. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer at his daily briefing appeared wholly confident the ban would still stand up to a legal challenge.
I think we feel very comfortable that the executive order that was crafted is consistent, and we're going to go forward on this, but I think we feel very confident with how that was crafted and the input that was given.
5 states have now begun action to challenge the new executive order, more in fact than took action against the first ban. And Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson believes their case is so sound the same court injunction granted last month still applies.
I'm asking Judge Robart, the federal district court judge, who we were before a month or so ago, to affirm that the injunction that we obtained last month continues to be in effect and prevents implementation of core provisions of President Trump's illegal and unconstitutional travel ban.
The revised ban no longer applies to anyone already holding a visa or green card, refugees already in transit, or anyone from Iraq. But it still bars entry to people from 6 predominantly Muslim countries. And Bob Ferguson says it's the court and not the government that decides whether the revised order is lawful.
It cannot be a game of whack-a-mole for the court. The court issues an injunction telling the president you cannot go forward with your travel ban. The president or anyone else who's subject to any injunction cannot simply repackage it in a way and say now we're clear of that injunction.
New York, Massachusetts and Oregon have joined Washington's lawsuit, and Hawaii has now launched a suit of its own, saying the revised order would harm its Muslim population, tourism and foreign students. Bob Ferguson says while the new order affects a smaller group of people, it won't change the state's ability to challenge it in court. As the lawyers lodge new claims in court, one man affected by the immigration ban told his story to members of Congress. Muhammad Ali Jr., son of the late boxing champion, was detained with his mother after they returned to the US from Jamaica last month. He says the ordeal highlights the need for legislation to end the practice of racial profiling.
I felt that my human rights was just abused. I felt like a immigrant. I mean, I felt just like I felt at my father's funeral. I didn't know what to think. I was just dumbfounded. Wow. But we need to step into the ring and join the fight for righteousness, for truth, and for peace.
A US Customs and Border Protection official says Mr Ali was held for questioning, but not because of his name or religion. The new immigration ban will go into effect next Thursday if it survives the legal challenge.
And that's Anne Barker reporting there. Wanaka retailers are celebrating the news that they can finally open for business on Easter Sunday after years of having to shut their doors, unlike shops in neighbouring Queenstown. The Queenstown Lakes District Council yesterday voted in favour of businesses in Wanaka to open on Easter Sunday, although trading still not allowed on Good Friday. Last year, the Shop Trading Hours Act was amended to allow councils to decide whether to let retailers open over Easter, and so far at least 6 councils have made the change. Logan Church reports.
Steve Worley from Yes Photo and Digital Wanaka has previously taken his chances and opened on Easter Sunday anyway. He has twice been prosecuted and is glad the council has now seen sense.
It's quite unfair for us, the retailers, trying to earn money, and also for staff who are not allowed to earn wages on those days. It's not 2017, it's like 1890.
The Queenstown Lakes District Mayor, Jim Bolt, says the change levels the playing field for Wanaka.
We've had, I guess, an anomaly in the district in that as retail trade has been allowed in Queenstown 365 days of the year, and neighbouring town in Wanaka has not had that ability. So this is about addressing a balance.
Mr Worley believes there's no place in a modern society for religious holidays.
In today's society, multicultural society, multi-religious, multi-faith, why do we need to impose our religious values on other faiths and religions?
The pastor of the Oxford Terrace Baptist Church in Christchurch, Chris Chamberlain, says the holiday is important for Christians, and it's also time for New Zealand to discuss holidays for other religious groups.
I think the conversation about how we express ourselves as a nation in terms of the holidays we have, it's an obvious thing that we need to continue discussing. I'm pretty relaxed about the fact that there are other religious expressions apart from Christianity going on in New Zealand. And we need to respect all of those things.
Jim Bolt says growth in regional tourism is putting pressure on retailers to open.
The whole of our district is now an international tourism destination, and if you are visiting our area, there is an expectation that you can do business as normal, no matter what day of the year it is when you're here.
Councils including those in the far north, Hauraki, Thames Coromandel, Rotorua, Masterton and New Plymouth have already voted to allow Easter Sunday trading. Back in Wanaka, Mr Worley says the changes are a good first step, but ultimately the decision to open or not should be down to the individual retailer.
It's a start, that's the main thing. So, yeah, why it's not open every day as you want, which what we would prefer, and let the decision come down to the retailer. We've been told we have to shut on Friday, so of course, but we won't be. We'll be open because it's a big day for us.
And Mr Worley says he's happy to be fined again if that's the price he has to pay to open on Easter Friday. For Checkpoint, call Logan Church Tene.
City people got their hands dirty when the Rural Games descended on Manawatu today. Founded in 2015 and run in Queenstown for the past 2 years, the Games are being held in Palmerston North this year. They were kicked off in the city's square today, and events including cowpat throwing and speed milking ensured it's going to be an action-packed weekend for locals and those who have travelled to participate in the Games. RNZ's rural reporter Alexa Cook is there amongst the excitement.
And here they come, down Manchester Street.
The quiet town of Fielding was not so quiet today. It's the first day of the Rural Games, and what better way to kick it off than with 1,000 sheep dashing 500 metres through the middle of town. Thousands turned up for a morning of rural races and the running of the wools. First up was a wool fadge relay race where the police, Air Force, Defence Force, the Turbo Rugby team and high school students stuffed sacks full of wool and carried it across 50 metres. The captain of the police team, Alan Lynch, was pleased that his team came out on top.
Yeah, we've put a lot of hard work into this, a lot of weeks training and stuff leading up to this, so it was good to beat the Fire guys since we're up against them. So.
Have you actually been training?
No, not at all. Person higher level up in the police force told me I had to come down here and do it.
This was followed by a man and mutt race, where 22 of the region's fastest young farmers belted up and down Manchester Street in gumboots with their dogs. Tom Nicol from Hunterville and his dog Bo easily beat the rest of the field, despite not training for the event.
Nah, none at all, just running around the hills in Hunterville.
Looks like you pretty much smoked them though, so you must have had a fair bit of training.
You keep pretty busy up in Hunterville there, doing plenty of running on all those hills there. So.
Margaret Cavallis is the chair of the New Zealand Rural Games Trust and says the event has a wider aim than just entertaining.
The aim of the Rural Games is to give back something of our legacy to the next generation. I really think that we're unique as New Zealanders, and people often say, what is it that makes us Kiwi? Well, I think a lot of that comes from rural values. That modesty that sits under our great athletes, that's all part of the modesty that I experienced and have for years around rural New Zealand. So these games actually represent more than just games. They represent a rural way of life and they represent values.
Today is the warm-up for the next 2 days of Rural Games in Palmerston North Square. There'll be some serious events such as a national and Trans-Tasman Championship for speed sharing and fencing, wood chopping, gumboot throwing and wine barrel racing. And for spectators who just want to have a go, they can try their hand at anything from egg throwing to tree climbing and coal shovelling to olive stone spitting. For Checkpoint from Fielding, Alexa Cook.
A health scare has sparked a major recall of lettuce from supermarkets across the country. Listeria, which is very dangerous for pregnant women, young children and the elderly, has been found in Leader brand Caesar salad. Leader brand has recalled all its pre-packaged salads, which are sold at Countdown, New World, Pack and Save and the fast food chain Subway. And its chief executive, Richard Burke, says they're taking other precautions while they try to get to the bottom of the problem.
We're doing testing all of the time from every day's production. So this is the one that's come up positive.
And so do you now have to go and test to see, sort of do wider testing because you have had this one positive test?
Oh, of course. I mean, we took the precaution of pulling all of our range or all of our product that had been through the factory. And we've done a battery of tests since then to isolate out where the issues are. We're still waiting for a lot of tests to come back, which is why we're not processing at the moment, and so we need to track down the source of it.
And does cos lettuce go into any of your other salad bags?
Cos does go into some of our other salad bags, but it's more the fact of the environmental issues, which was the risk that we assessed higher, and that's why we recalled all of our lines.
So, sorry, what do you mean by the environmental issues?
The fact that it had been through the same facility more than anything else.
And I guess on that note, what do you think could have caused this?
Look, it's a little bit early to be sure. We have got people working on that and have done since we were made aware of it. So we really need some more testing to come back to be really sure of the source of it. Until we get to there, we'd really only be speculating.
And so could you speculate what are the sort of things that could cause this? And of course, I know you're not saying it has caused this, but where does listeria come from in a plant like yours?
Well, it can come from either the raw material, because it is a soil-borne disease in some instances, or from the environment itself. But at this stage, it's like I said, we're not at a point where we can isolate it. So we're waiting for tests before we can confirm that.
And Richard, what's your advice for customers who have already bought the product?
At this stage, if you haven't consumed it, we're advising people to either return it to store or to dump it, and not to consume it.
Are you worried about any of your customers getting sick because of one of your products?
Oh, of course we're concerned. I mean, at the end of the day, we took the precaution to recall everything so that we can mitigate the risk as much as possible. We've been in the vegetable business for 40 years and in salads for 20. We understand this. It's why we moved so quickly, or as quickly as we could, to remove the product from the shelf and advise people.
And that is the Chief Executive of Leader Brand, Richard Burke. Well, coming up after 6 o'clock tonight, is Auckland facing its worst water crisis in 20 years? The upper North Island prepares for more bad weather, and residents of the Coromandel Valley say they have, until this week, they hadn't seen heavy rainfall like they've seen for 35 years, and they say it's a miracle that lives weren't lost. And Christchurch's iconic sign of the Kiwi Cafe is reopening after weathering the Port Hills fires and the quakes. And we'd love to hear your feedback. Please get in touch via text on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint at RNZ.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Paul Brennan. A medical officer of health says if partially treated water is released into Auckland's supply due to the storm, people will have to boil their water or risk getting sick. More than 220 millimetres of rain, or 2 months' worth, fell in 12 hours in the Hunua Ranges from late Tuesday, washing dirt into a storage lake for the city. Watercare says unless people save about 20 litres of water each a day, partially treated water might have to go into the supply and need boiling to be safe to drink. Auckland Regional Medical Officer of Health David Sinclair says health officials are working closely with Watercare. He says the water is safe at the moment, but there is potential for a boil water notice.
The issue there is that chlorination doesn't necessarily kill off one particular organism, Cryptosporidium, and that can cause gastroenteritis. It's an incubation period of about a week.
Medical Officer of Health David Sinclair. The Christchurch City Councillor running against Jerry Brownlee in Ilam says the electorate needs new leadership that is collaborative, inclusive and strategic. Raf Manji will stand as an independent for the Christchurch seat, which Mr Brownlee has held since 1996. He won by 11,000 votes last time. Mr Manji is a former investment banker and chairs the Council's Strategy and Finance Committee. He says Christchurch's recovery has been hampered by Mr Brownlee, who's led the government's response to the Canterbury earthquakes. Mr Manji told Checkpoint Christchurch needs a new independent voice to tell its story.
We haven't had a strategic view. This was confirmed in the Auditor General's report that was released a couple of months ago. We need to review what we've done and where are we going. Where's the economic development plan? Where's the thinking for the next 10 years? Where's the population plan? We need to refresh this, and I think now's the time to do it.
Raf Manji grew up in the UK and moved to New Zealand in 2002. The principal of Wellington College says the boys at the centre of a controversy over comments about rape will face consequences. The boys boasted in Facebook posts about raping drunk, unconscious girls. Emile Donovan reports.
In a letter to parents, Roger Moses says a process is underway, so he can't yet say what will happen to them. Mr Moses also praises the boys who reported the comments to the school. He said they did the right thing and represent the best of Wellington College values. In the letter, Mr Moses also says senior students and the principal of Wellington Girls College will speak at a Wellington College assembly next week. He says the students at Wellington Girls and Wellington East Girls College are angry and upset at what's been said. He also says the school will strengthen its programs aimed at educating boys about healthy relationships and consent. This is Emile Donovan.
South Koreans will go to the polls in the next 2 months to choose a new leader after the country's highest court voted to remove President Park Geun-hye from office. The president was impeached by Parliament in December over a corruption scandal, and the court has now upheld that. From Seoul, here's the BBC's Steve Evans.
The justices were devastating in their judgment. They said that President Park had committed a grave breach of the law by being involved in the way her best friend took money from corporations. It was against the Constitution and the trust of the people, the lead justice said. Park Geun-hye is now kicked from office and open to prosecution in ordinary courts. The moment the judgment was announced, there was cheering in the streets, but there is also pro-Park feeling. There will be elections in 60 days.
And that was the BBC's Steve Evans reporting there. The Labour Party says New Zealand must focus on its own plan to tackle climate change after the new head of the United States Environmental Protection Agency denied humans are causing global warming. Scott Pruitt says he's not convinced carbon dioxide pollution from burning fossil fuels like oil, gas and coal is the main cause of climate change. Labour's climate change spokesperson Megan Woods says the US stance is disappointing.
I'd like to have thought that we'd arrived at a point where people weren't disputing the science in the same way that they weren't disputing whether or not the Earth was round. Of course, it's disappointing to see world leaders not taking the strong stance they have under previous administrations on this issue, but really we've just got to double down on our own targets.
The Labour MP Megan Woods. A full list of products recalled by the Leader brand salad producer will be made available on the Ministry for Primary Industries website. The company, which sells several salad products under a variety of brands, says Listeria bacteria was found in a batch yesterday during regular testing. The Ministry is working with the company to find out the source of the contamination and prevent future occurrences. A Leader brand spokesperson says people shouldn't eat any salads bought since March the 3rd, with best before dates from March the 15th, and can return them to the retailer for a full refund. Anyone with health concerns should contact their GP. It's 6:04. On to sport now. Play has resumed at University Oval in Dunedin after a short stoppage for a fire alarm late on day 3 of the first test between New Zealand and South Africa. A short time ago, South Africa was 16 for 1, 17 runs behind New Zealand's first innings total. It will be a unique experience for Warriors coach Steve Kearney in just his second match in charge of the National Rugby League club at Mount Smart Stadium tonight. The Warriors are taking on the Melbourne Storm, two sides Kearney played and coached for during his career. Kearney isn't concerned about the significance of the occasion, but rather about what he sees as a huge challenge from one of the game's most successful clubs. Kearney says the Storm, who have won the premiership twice and have been runners-up 3 times, including last year, are always tough.
It's a bit like playing the Manchester Uniteds, and they're consistently been at the top of their game for the last 15 years, and so to get the opportunity to play against them, you got to be at your best, and so I'm really excited by that opportunity.
Warriors coach Steve Kearney there. Our kick-off is at 8 o'clock. The former All Black Ali Williams will appear before a French rugby disciplinary hearing later this month after being arrested for allegedly buying cocaine. Williams, a 77-test veteran, has been summoned to appear at the National Rugby League's Disciplinary Commission on March the 29th. Williams was arrested in the early hours of the morning outside a Paris nightclub last month. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, master of what he calls the attacking medium of the cartoon, The Guardian's unclubbable and unpredictable Steve Bell. Dr. Nia Sangwan on how to avoid or recover from burnout. She's done the latter. And author Ian Maguire on his blood-soaked, violent, profane, whaling novel. Join me, Camille, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Now here's the short forecast for the country, taking us through to midnight tomorrow Saturday. And remember, heavy rain warnings still in force for the northern North Island and the upper South Island. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, periods of rain or showers, thunderstorms and localised downpours at times, especially in the afternoons and evenings. Waikato to Manawatu, including Bay of Plenty in the central high country, a few showers turning to periods of rain this evening or tonight. Localised downpours and thunderstorms are possible, mainly overnight and again tomorrow afternoon. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, occasional rain or showers. Could be some heavy falls tomorrow with isolated thunderstorms from the afternoon. Hortowhenua to Wellington, also Wairarapa. Mainly fine for the rest of today. Occasional rain or showers tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland. Periods of rain developing this evening. Some heavy falls in Nelson in the morning. Canterbury, fine for the rest of today, though rain developing overnight tonight and a few heavy falls are possible tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, cloud increases, scattered rain develops about Otago tomorrow. And at the Chathams, a fine rest of the day with rain developing tomorrow. It's 6:08.
Thanks, Paul. Well, Watercare says Auckland's still a way off the worst case scenario as the city faces its biggest water crisis in more than 20 years. That's after the dams in the Hunua Ranges got 2 months' worth of rain in just 2 hours this week. And the silt and debris in the water means the Ardmore treatment plant can only treat about half the usual amount. Aucklanders have been asked to cut their water usage by about 20 litres of water a day. If that doesn't happen, partially treated water might have to go into the supply and will require boiling before it can be drunk. I asked Mark Bourne from Watercare what the worst case scenario would look like.
I think we're a little way away from the worst case, but what we do need to realise is that we're asking people to save water, but the consequences is if we don't meet those savings targets, we still need to maintain supply into the pipeline so that we can flush toilets and do all the other things we do with water. The reality is the amount of water we actually consume for drinking purposes and cooking purposes is a relatively small proportion of the total amount. So that worst case scenario would be that partially treated water would still be chlorinated, would pass into supply, but it would require additional treatment. And the best thing for that is boiling the water that you're going to consume directly.
And what kind of bugs are we talking about that could be making their way into people's water?
Yeah. So I think, once again, we need to put things into a little bit of perspective. We're very, very fortunate in Auckland that the vast majority of our water, the water from the Hunua Ranges and the water from the Waitakere Ranges, comes from protected catchments. What that means is there's no industrial activity, there's no farms, there's no activity in those catchments at all. Water falls on native bush catchments or pine forest catchments and is stored in those dams. So the water quality itself, even that raw water quality, is very, very high quality compared with other sources of water. The treatment plant still offers those barriers of treatment, and the final portion of that is disinfection through chlorination. So it's quite unlike other parts of the world. But the important thing, I think, is right now the water quality that's in our taps is certainly safe to drink. There's no compromise in it at all, and that's why we've reduced the output from our Ardmore treatment plant. But what we're looking for is just everyone making those savings.
And that's Mark Bourne from Watercare there. Well, RNZ News spoke to people on the streets of Auckland today, and only 2 out of the 15 people we spoke to didn't know about the push to conserve water, and most had already started doing it in a variety of ways.
Probably not use the dishwasher so much, not use the washing machine so much, and have the kids take a bath in the same water.
Me and my wife have our own little bin outside. Taking the rain and the whole tank that we use for the whole house.
I'd say shorter showers is probably the main thing that uses up water in my house at least.
And meanwhile, heavy thundery downpours between now and Sunday for northern parts of the North Island will likely bring further slips and dangerously high river levels to the already saturated northeast. In the Coromandel, some of those hardest hit this week are unhappy they haven't been visited by emergency services. Residents of the Coraglen Valley just south of Whitianga say they haven't seen heavy rainfall like it for 35 years, and it was a miracle lives weren't lost. Here's Zach Fleming.
The aftermath of Tuesday night's weather bomb. The muddy brown water may have receded now, but the broken, twisted metal railings across the bridge of the Waiwawa River show how high the floodwaters rose. David Humphreys was visiting his father from Australia.
Oh, it's very scary, yeah. It was imminent danger, basically. We had to evacuate the house, and there was a wall of water probably half a metre higher than the house, and it was being held up by all the debris in the trees. But there was trees getting knocked down. There was massive kauri logs, half the size of around as this bridge coming down. That's what took out the bridge, and it was very scary.
For people who aren't watching, so we're standing on a bridge that's what you'd probably say about 2.5 metres above the water level?
Yeah, the water was probably a good 1.5 metres above the bridge here. And
so we're talking this river swelled around 3 metres or so?
Well, no, this river would have come up 10 metres sort of thing from where it is now. It was over that road, and it was just, there was logs coming down the size, as I said, half the size of this bridge. I stood here watching it, and it just took out the whole both the rails, built up and took out. Surprised it didn't take out the whole bridge, really.
48 hours on, David says he's thankful lives weren't lost.
We've got 2 houses on this property here. We had to evacuate the first house. If the river had to come up another half a metre, it would have taken that house out. And so we were just running around checking stock and trying to make sure everyone was safe, really. Very, very scary. I've never seen, as I said, we've been here 35 years and seen quite a few floods, and we're all aware of how dangerous the river can be in Mother Nature, but that was something we've never seen.
There's been no sign of anyone from Civil Defence since the floods struck. David says it's been a case of neighbours looking out for each other.
We honestly expected, my sister kept saying the helicopter will be up here soon, and we expected to see a helicopter come and, check if everyone was all right, because, that road could have easily been washed out. But no, there was no sign of any choppers or anything. But anyway, the locals just sort of all looked after themselves, basically, yeah.
Further along the road, farmhands Sharon and Karen Gregory were woken at 4 a.m. on Wednesday morning.
Came down here and all underwater, so we drove up, back and around and down this way where the cows had swum up over the fence posts and up to higher ground.
So the water was at such a high level, it was above the fence post, and the cows just swam over
top, yeah.
And we had a neighbour who had to come in about 3:30 and cut all the fences, so the cows could actually swim over the fences and escape to high ground.
So how did he get in if it was all underwater?
He was swimming. There's a group of them in the far corner over there that had to go for a big swim and ended up at neighbouring farms, so yeah.
How far away did they end up?
Well, we had about
good few kilometres.
Yeah, good few kilometres. We've got 12 in a neighbouring farm over there, so they went for a swim under the bridge, and about 5 others at a further farm along the road, so they've had a bit of a big battle.
How far away are we talking? Like if we were trying and drive, maybe? How long would it take us to get to the farm they ended up at?
5 or 10 minutes. 10 minutes the furthest one.
Yeah.
It's pretty far away.
Yeah, not quite close to Whitianga.
David Humphreys says he and his family are on tenterhooks tonight, bracing themselves for more rain.
And we're all battening down, I suppose, but it just depends on how much rain there is. They only forecast 100 mil the other night, and there was nearly 500, nearly half a metre up in the pinnacles. And that's what caused, and plus the tide was high. I think a combination of those two factors, caused it, and also the river further up was dammed up a bit here and there. There were just naturally formed dams with debris in that, and what happens is when that much rain comes, it banks up on those dams until it reaches a point where it lets go, and then it just comes down. And as I said, no one's seen anything like it.
The heaviest rain is expected to hit later tonight. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
And Scott Simpson is the Thames Coromandel MP, and he joins us now from Thames. Hello, Scott.
Good evening.
What's your advice to people there?
Take care, use your common sense, and be ready for what Mother Nature might bring this evening and through the night. I'm in Thames right now, and it's raining pretty steadily, quite heavily, and the prediction is that will continue through until the wee small hours of tomorrow morning.
So you're asking people to stay put, really, where they are?
Yeah, I think so. I think the sensible advice now as night is about to descend is probably to hunker down, get home, make sure that animals and stock are well cared for and have been moved to higher ground, and don't drive unless you need to. Stay tuned to radios and news outlets, and if you're able to get updates from Civil Defence and from Thames Coromandel District Council, do so through the internet or their email list.
You've already had such a battering there. Where is the greatest need at the moment as it stands now?
Well, the greatest need has been attended to over the last 24 hours, where we've had about 24 hours of respite. So our emergency first responders, most of whom are volunteers, have done an outstanding job, as they always do in these situations. But our civil defence crews have also been busy. I listened to the very graphic descriptions of your previous two speakers from our region, and they highlighted exactly the dramas and the challenges that we're confronting over the whole of the peninsula. So lots of debris, lots of heavy swollen rivers and streams, and lots of potential for risk and danger. So it's a situation that we do need to take seriously, and people should be cautious and not take unnecessary risks.
And I guess you heard in that little piece there as well that some people were worried that there hadn't been enough of a response from Civil Defence. Do you think it's been able to get to enough people yet?
Yeah, I think that Civil Defence have done a very good job. We're well-versed and well-practiced to heavy and severe rain events in the peninsula. I did hear the concern that maybe a helicopter hadn't arrived. I haven't seen any helicopters around. But if people do have concerns, don't hesitate to be in touch with Civil Defence directly or to be in touch with the Thames Coromandel District Council. They are prioritising their responses, but they don't have ESP, and it does help if people let them know what the conditions are like in their neighbourhood, in their area, and that helps. So feedback's important.
Thanks for your time this evening. That's Scott Simpson, who is the Thames Coromandel MP. A fourth environmental group has pulled out of the government's Land and Water Forum, saying the government's new freshwater standards are the last straw. The Federated Mountain Clubs joined Forest and Bird, Fish and Game and the Environment and Conservation Organisation ECO in resigning from the Freshwater Management Group. The government's freshwater policy has attracted widespread criticism since it was announced last month, with environmental groups upset that it allowed more pollution of rivers classed as swimmable. Our reporter Demelza Leslie has more. The Federated Mountain Clubs, which has 20,000 members, says it's no longer tenable for it to be part of the Land and Water Forum. The club's vice president and water spokesperson, Jan Finlayson, says the freshwater policy was the breaking point.
The government has treated Land and Water Forum very improperly. I think the stakeholders acted in good faith and they stuck with it, but they were let down by a government that simply ignored their advice.
The forum gives more than 50 stakeholders, including industry groups, non-government organisations, iwi, scientists and others, a chance to agree on recommendations to be made to government on freshwater management. It's existed for 9 years, although Fish and Game withdrew from it in 2015, saying it was being muzzled and stopped from speaking out on environmental issues. The Green Party's water spokesperson, Catherine Delahunty, says the number of groups leaving makes a mockery of the forum, which she says is dissolving before her eyes.
Well, it just shows that the process has been undermined by the government. What was started with the best of intentions has now become no longer viable for the environment groups. And if they're not there, the strong national environment groups, or if there's only one or two left, and the forum's bleeding, these key leadership groups, then it's no longer a collaborative process.
Catherine Delahunty says the government has been cherry-picking the Land and Water Forum's recommendations on freshwater management.
The government is very clear about their water policy, which is that they want business as usual while appearing to do something about the state of our rivers. They still want to make sure that irrigators and farmers can continue to intensify agriculture. And the groups that have been in the Land and Water Forum, groups like Fish and Game, Forest and Bird, Federated Mountain Clubs, that's not why they're there. They're not there to tick off a whitewash.
A spokesperson for the Environment Minister, Nick Smith, believes the environmental groups are trying to score political points in an election year by resigning from the forum. The spokesperson says the Land and Water Forum's work is largely done, and if National is re-elected in September, then the Minister would hope groups like the Federated Mountain Clubs reconsider their position. But Jan Finlayson says there was nothing political in her group's move.
We see that our colleagues in Forest and Bird and in Fish and Game have been treated very badly, very poorly indeed, and we sympathise with them, and we see no benefit to remaining in the plenary group of law.
The Federated Mountain Clubs hopes that its resignation from the forum will prompt a formal review of the way collaborative groups set up by the government are treated. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Demelza Leslie. Wildlife campaigners are celebrating the arrests of animal traffickers in West Africa as a big step against the illegal trade of baby chimpanzees. The infant apes fetch huge prices on the black market as pets. The BBC's David Shookman led a special investigation into the illegal trade, and he went back to the Ivory Coast to visit the baby chimp at the centre of it all.
A heartwarming story of recovery. A baby chimpanzee, Nemli Jr., with a great appetite. An astonishing turnaround given the trauma he's been through. Poachers killed his mother and the rest of his family, and then sold him to wildlife traffickers. He's learning to explore. He was freed as a result of a BBC News investigation. But he never likes to get too far from his keepers. He wants constant company. Chimpanzees live in close families in the wild. Nemli Jr. has now lost his and needs a new one.
Now, he's never going to make it back into the wild, so the best hope is to create bonds with a new family.
Just a few months ago, he looked so much thinner while in the hands of animal smugglers. They were selling him for $12,500. We briefed the police and they moved in. A raid led to 2 arrests. A young dealer called Ibrahima Traore and his uncle Mohammed. They're now awaiting trial. The first prosecution for wildlife trafficking that Ivory Coast has ever seen. And with big money involved, they're linked to another network of traffickers in Guinea. The Sidibe family also sold baby chimpanzees, but 2 of them have now been arrested. So this could be a turning point.
Once you get one, you arrest them, you prosecute them, you incarcerate them. That message starts to get out that wildlife crime is no longer, high profit, low risk. There's a risk here. In fact, I might go to jail.
The dealers circulate videos of the chimps for sale. Wildlife investigators say the arrests will slow the trade, but not stop it entirely.
It is just one big step, but it is a never-ending battle with wildlife trafficking.
Back at the zoo, Nemli Jr. is playful. A mobile phone keeps him amused. It's reassuring to see him thriving. And also to think that with 4 traffickers arrested, other chimps in the jungles may be a little safer.
David Shookman reporting there from Ivory Coast. Tomorrow marks 6 years since Japan faced a 3-pronged disaster, an earthquake, a tsunami and a nuclear meltdown at Fukushima. When the radiation cloud began to spread, it prompted immediate orders for hundreds of thousands of people to evacuate. Now, some of those people say what they've been through since amounts to a human rights violation, a disaster in itself. Here's the ABC's Rachel Mealy.
Noriko Matsumoto lived in the town of Koriyama in Fukushima Prefecture with her husband and 12-year-old daughter when the disaster struck. Her house was about 70 kilometres west of the Fukushima power plant, and while that sounds close, her family's home wasn't classified as being in the no-go zone because of the direction of the radiation cloud in the immediate aftermath of the disaster. She says the family took the advice of the authorities and stayed where they were in the weeks that followed. Her daughter continued attending her school in Fukushima City, but by April, Ms. Matsumoto felt that wasn't the right decision.
As she went to school, the situation started to change. Some people were evacuating and some students were getting nosebleeds. I started to do my own research and found out that central Fukushima was contaminated with radiation. My daughter was having nosebleed problems, and I thought I had to get her out of there.
The government allowed for compensation for families like hers. If you chose to move out of the area, there was a one-off payment for adults of about $8,000 and for children of $4,000 each. This meant she and her daughter could move to Kanagawa, which is just south of Tokyo. Because it's more expensive than her other city, she was given rental assistance. Her husband was unable to find work in the new location, so he remained behind, and they only saw each other once every 2 months. She says their treatment has amounted to continued human rights violations.
I think we have a right to evacuate when we feel the danger. Nuclear electricity was the national government's policy and the accident was caused by humans. But the government is not taking proper responsibility, nor assisting the victims.
Now, after 6 years of living in exile from her own home and living away from her husband, the rental assistance she receives for her tiny one-room apartment in Kanagawa will cease later this month.
I feel that we're being abandoned. I negotiate with the government and exchange opinions, but the government is leaving it in the Fukushima prefecture's hands. But the Fukushima prefecture says it's because the central government has decided it will lift the evacuation orders after 6 years.
Ms Matsumoto longs to return to her home in Koriyama, but says it's not a viable option.
Our house is not big, but it's the house and town where my daughter grew up since she was a child. Of course, I would like to go home, but whenever we return, my daughter has health problems. We feel we would like to go home, but we're unable to in this condition, so we have mixed feelings.
The operators at the Fukushima nuclear power plant say they'll take another 30 years to bring it to a state of cold shutdown. For many people, the disaster will never be over.
And that report there from the ABC's Rachel Measley. Well, concerns have been raised that one of the boys at the centre of a Facebook controversy at Wellington College will represent his school at a major sporting event tomorrow. Two boys joked on Facebook about raping drunk, unconscious girls. And in a letter to parents today, Wellington College Principal Roger Moses says a process is underway and he can't say what consequences the two boys will likely face. He also praised the boys who reported the comments to the school. In the last few minutes, Checkpoint has heard from the school spokesperson, Anna Kominick, who says she won't comment on the whereabouts of the two students. And that is Checkpoint for this evening. Thanks for joining us on your radio, your television, online, or however you chose to connect with us today. And you can hear highlights in late edition at 10:15 this evening. So from me, Rowan Quinn, and the Checkpoint team, have a great night and a great weekend.
RNZ News at 6:30. The headlines. Watercare says if Aucklanders don't reduce their daily water usage following this week's floods, there will need to be a boil water notice. And more than 600 homes are without power in Titirangi. The Christchurch City Councillor, Raf Manji, has announced he'll run against Jerry Brownlee in this year's election. The principal of Wellington College says the boys at the centre of a controversy over comments about rape will face consequences. And the salad producer Leader Brand is recalling all of its products and suspending operations after a batch of salad tested positive for listeria. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This week, Bill English sprang a surprise by putting superannuation in play as a political issue. On Media Watch this weekend, we look at how reporters responded to an issue which they've told us over and over is almost untouchable. We also look at why a crop of new ads featuring our farmers is on the way, and we talk to a long-time journalist who's gone over to the dark side, but he insists